So hello, we would like to welcome our audience both here and our Facebook live stream to the 2017 Young Ambassadors Program. What's next in STEM conversation? We are live from the Ford Motor Company offices in Washington, D.C., and our conversation today will focus on the current and new opportunities in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM. We have with us engineers Andres Andy Gutierrez with Ford Motor Company, Edgar Duenez-Guzman with DeepMind, and Dr. Lydia Villa-Komaroff, a molecular and cellular biologist and founding member of SACNAS. And I am your moderator, Yajaira Sierra-Sastre. The Smithsonian Latino Center would like to thank Ford Motor Company Fund for their continued support and partnership over the past decade with the Young Ambassadors Program. If you have any questions, please place them in the comment section of the live stream, and we hope to get to them at the end of the conversation. And now, to the conversation at hand, okay? So let's get started. So welcome to our panelists. Welcome. We would like to start with some introduction about what do you do, your background, so that our audience and the great students here get to know more about what is your area that you focus on. So let's start with Andy.
Okay. So my name is Andy Gutierrez. I am a fourth generation Ford employee. I have 11 years at Ford Motor Company, and I work within Powertrain integration on a future SUV. So Powertrain deals with engine, transmission, exhaust, mounts, fuel, driveline, basically everything that moves the vehicle. My group is responsible to integrate in the vehicle, make sure it works correctly, and then we have a quality product for customers down the road.
Excellent. So what about you, Lydia?
My name is Lydia Villa-Komaroff, and I'm a second generation Mexican-American, and I guess I'm a first generation scientist in the family. There were many migrant farm workers in the family. I was the first migrant postdoc. And so I moved I went to school first in Maryland, and then I went to MIT, and then I went back to Cambridge, Mass. To do a postdoc at Harvard University, and spent many years as a faculty member and then as a faculty administrator. My work as a molecular biologist had to do with manipulating molecules of RNA and DNA, so that as a result of that work, of that first work back in the 70s, anybody taking insulin for diabetes is taking insulin that was made using the processes that we developed back at that time. I'm now semi-retired, which means I'm busier than ever, but doing what I want to do when I want to do it.
Excellent. What about you, Edgar?
Well, I'm Edgar Duenez-Guzman. I currently work for DeepMind, which is a subsidiary of Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google. And what I do there is machine intelligence. But before I did that, I had a very circuitous path through science and technology. I'm from Mexico. I was born and raised there. I did an undergrad in math, and then I really loved computers, so I wanted to do computer science. And so I did my Ph.D. in the United States over a decade ago. So, but I fell in love with biology during my PhD, and so I did a couple of postdocs in biology, one at Harvard and one in Belgium at KU Leuven. And I was trying to be a scientist. I wanted to save the world, and however, being a scientist is tough. my highest respects for Lydia. So instead, what I did was work for Google. Google recruited me out of kind of my passion for problem solving and computer science. And so I worked there for 3.5 years, and just recently changed ship to DeepMind.
Excellent. So you were born and raised in Guadalajara, Mexico.
That's right.
What inspired you? What was your source of inspiration to pursue a career in engineering? How did you get inspired or interested in engineering?
Absolutely. Well, I've always been a nerd. I lived one block away from Estadio Jalisco, the place where soccer games were played, and despite the best efforts of my uncle to inspire some desire to play some soccer or to be interested in it. I didn't. But my uncle also, the same uncle, who was kind of a father figure, my mother was a single mother, and he was a high school teacher for physics. So he would tell me stories about physicists, about how Galileo invented the telescope and saw the moons of Jupiter for the first time, and he bought a computer for the family, and my older brother, who is a professor of mathematics, would program that computer back in the days, and I would sit for hours. I was like 5, 6 years old. I wanted to be an astronomer because of the stories of my uncle, but then I would sit for hours next to my brother who would program the computer to make it do little tweets or a little game or whatever, and I just fell in love with computers there, and I sort of kept following that path of math, computer science, other sciences throughout my life.
Excellent. What about you, Andy? How did you fall in love with cars? When was that first time that you said, yes, I want to work with cars?
I think I grew up brainwashed. Yeah, my father was an engineer for Ford, and mentioned a fourth generation. So Ford is in my blood. My family has a lot of history there in Detroit, and it's known as the Motor City. So I think having a pride of being from the Motor City in that area, my father being an example there, working in the industry, and then really just having a love for cars. You know, each year we go to the auto show. Since I was 5 years old, my dad would take me, and you go there and you have the latest models, the latest concepts, and then when you see a car, you can pop the hood, and there's 200 touchable parts under the hood and underneath the vehicle, and you touch the pedal and the car goes. So there's a lot of complexity there, but it was just always amazing to me. You know, one, the engineering behind it, the complexity, the different parts and people involved, and then two, just people are passionate about their cars. People love their cars. You can go anywhere in the world and people know what Ford Motor Company is. You can go anywhere in the world and people know what the Mustang is. And I've had the opportunity to work at that company and work on that vehicle. And that's something that really you can put your passion into and go full at it.
Excellent. What about you, Lydia? How did you fall in love with molecular and cell biology? How did you get there?
I think it started really, I think many biologists started as naturalists. And both my grandmother and my mother really loved plants. And my grandmother on my father's side, whom I never met because she died of diabetes before I was born, she was the curandera for the neighborhood. So she understood how plants could be used for curative purposes, and she could set bones, and she had hangover remedies and stuff like that. And my grandmother on my mother's side was a wonderful cook, and I think that introduced me to the idea of chemistry. And so really I started out not being sure what kind of scientist I wanted to be, just that I wanted to be a scientist. Cell and molecular biology came because I really got interested in how we come from one cell, an egg, that's fertilized, and that one cell, over 9 months, changes and differentiates and goes to the right place and migrates and multiplies, and you have at the end of it a little baby, which is truly amazing. And so trying to understand that was really what got me going in biology.
So I read very awesome things from your biography, and I read that you published a landmark paper when you were doing your postdoc, reporting the first synthesis of mammalian insulin in bacterial cells. Would you consider that your like the greatest discovery in science in your career? Like how do you, what do you have to share about that experience and that work?
It's certainly the work for which I'm best known, and it certainly set it opened doors for me for the rest of my career. It made it possible for me to get jobs, and pretty much opens doors wherever I go. Got me going to meetings around the world, made it possible for me to consult for law firms on some of those early recombinant DNA processes, because the patents get fought for 20 years after they're put in. So I did a lot of work that way, and it provided me with a fair amount of extra money as well, because the patent that we did on the synthesis and how you make molecules in bacteria provided us with a very nice extra income for a good many years until that patent expired. So it was an important work. I don't know that it was my most important. Time will tell. I think it'll remain the thing that I'm best known for, because it was such a key part of the early history of recombinant DNA. which led to what's going on now with CRISPR and other kinds of molecules. But work that I did as a faculty member where we provided some of the first evidence that a particular protein is damaging in Alzheimer's disease, and other work like that, where basically what I did was take the tools of molecular biology and work with people in other fields to try to find out the way biological systems work. And so I think that body of work is there, less known, but underpins a fair number of things that have gone on over the last 40 years. I'm old.
So I
around
see,
a long time.
So I see a lot of engagement and activities as a scientist working on trying to find answers to fundamental questions in science, but as well as, you know, using tools or creating tools that are using biotech and biology for more applied type of research.
Yes, I think that's why they called us genetic engineers, because like my colleagues here on this panel, scientists will very frequently learn things for the sake of learning them. They're just really interesting, and you never really know where they'll go. When you get to a certain point, though, you want to know how you can make something happen in the world. You know, make a car run, make it run better, make it use less gas. Figure out how you can use computation to answer questions for anybody, anywhere, anytime with this little thing that we all carry now. And so I think that biology, basic science and engineering are coming closer and closer together. And as a result, we see things move from the laboratory out into the real world more rapidly. It's a very exciting time. You guys have lots of options.
So talking about interdisciplinary research, Edgar, you have experience in theoretical biology, but you are a computer scientist, computer engineer. Can you let us, can you explain that? Yeah, how you were able to combine those two areas of knowledge and research, and just tell us more about that.
Oh goodness, yes. It's a good thing we have a Facebook live stream because it's complicated. So it's interesting. So I didn't think that I was qualified to be a software engineer at Google. I was working in search engine for 3.5 years, but the reason why they hired me is because as a biologist, I was doing large-scale computations, trying to simulate populations of animals, be them butterflies or apes or whatever. And what I was particularly interested in was in the evolution of altruism, cooperation, and how competition and cooperation kind of play together to give us the beautiful complexity of life. So I was trying to understand that, and to understand that you need sort of a lot of computational power to simulate multiple variations of scenarios. And so that was, I think, a key factor for there. But more to the point, right? Now that I am working in DeepMind, there is a team inside of DeepMind that publishes research in fundamental evolution of cooperation and altruism. Mm-hmm. They want to figure out, now that we're creating artificial minds, computers are starting to think more and more like humans. You might have seen examples of this all around with artificial intelligence looking at a picture and telling you what there is in that picture. That is powered by new developments in machine learning. And now that we have these small minds, we want to figure out how to make them nice, right? We want to make them cooperative. We want to make them have the values, in a sense, that humans have. We want to instill the values of humans, because otherwise the machines are just going to optimize whatever we want them to optimize. And that can have very, very bad consequences if we do it in the wrong way. So one of the projects that I'm involved with is precisely in trying to understand how we can instill our human values of niceness, of cooperation, of altruism into the interaction between computers in a multi-agent system. So that is very, very long, but a full circle.
Interesting. So I will ask Andy, how smart are the cars that you built at Ford? And do you see any intersections between, the mechanical engineering aspects of building and designing cars and artificial intelligence?
I think the capability of cars has grown a lot over the years. from safety aspects, safety technologies. You have cars that can adjust themselves and cruise control. You have cars that can parallel park themselves. A lot of safety features. I think I'll touch on autonomous vehicles in a minute. We have hybrid and electric vehicles. That's a growing area. And then just the idea of fuel efficiency, sustainability in the plant. So Ford's a large company, but we try and use technology in a lot of areas. So not just in the design of cars, but also how we manufacture the cars and the impact on the world and the environment around us afterwards. So we try and be engage at technology in everything that we do. Autonomous vehicles, I think Ford's trying to grow a lot in that area. They mentioned by 2021 they want to have a level 4 autonomous vehicle, which means no steering wheel, no accelerator pedal, no brake pedal. It's going to be controlled by computers and sensors. So I think that's kind of what they're talking about, is technologies in the past that were in a laboratory or things that were more science-based are now integrated in the vehicle. That technology is growing fast, and they anticipate it's going to have the same impact that the assembly line had. So the assembly line changed the world. That put Ford on the map. It made the vehicle affordable for everybody. And I think this idea of autonomous vehicles, being able to be to the market quickly with it, be able to scale it globally, make it affordable is one of those areas. But I think there's a lot of things to consider as far as making them safe, making them user-friendly, working how customers expect them to work. But you involve everything, engineering, science, there's medical aspects, there's government affairs, so it touches on a lot of areas, and it's a pretty complex and exciting area to be in.
Excellent. So Andy, tell us more about the word that you feel most proud of, the Mustang. I understand that it was
What I'm most proud of, and I think working at Ford is to this point, it was working on the 2015 Mustang. It was the 50th anniversary, and I worked on that program for 3 years. So being able to come early on in that program and early prototype builds, being able to be there at the prototype plant, working hands-on with the engineers, the manufacturing staff, the people who engage the suppliers, fixing all kinds of issues, manufacturing issues, design issues, quality issues, and driving that process. And then you go and test the vehicles. And throughout the test process, they come up with all kinds of issues, and I have to engage a cross-functional team within Powertrain, electrical, body, chassis to fix these issues. Then once we get all those fixed, we go build another round of prototype vehicles. And then we test those vehicles, we find more issues, and that culminates with a launch that takes about 8 months. We're at the final assembly plant, and again, we're there. It's hands-on. It's quick pace. There's a lot of pressure, but I think on the Mustang, you have people who are passionate, people who are talented, and being it's the 50th anniversary, it's a special product. So I think being able to work on that, and for the rest of my life, I can say I worked on the 50th anniversary, and take pride in that. It's going to be a collector car one day, and it's something I can point to and say I was part of that team.
Excellent, excellent. So that meaning of purpose, right, on what we do, I share that the importance of having a sense of purpose on what we do. So tell us more about how do you feel or see yourself meeting that purpose of making lives better through the work that you are doing at Duenez?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely always have wanted to save the world. I wanted to be a scientist because I wanted to save the world. When I joined Google, it was because their philosophy, their mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, which seems like a very, very good altruistic, you can see the thread that sort of underlies all of my life here, a very altruistic mission. And I think that while Google has this very good idealism, I feel that the next scientific revolution is going to come, or the next everything revolution, right? Economic and scientific revolution is going to come from intelligent machines. So I don't want to say that my proudest moment is in the past. I want to say that my proudest moment is in the future, because I want to be there when it happens. I want to be there when we crack intelligence, when we actually fundamentally understand how something becomes intelligent, how something can be made intelligent. And I want to be part of that revolution. And I think that is exactly it. So the mission of DeepMind is to fundamentally solve intelligence and then use it to make the world a better place. That is their mission. And they have a governance, an ethics committee that says that their artificial intelligence systems cannot be used for harm. They have to be used for good. So I feel like I have one vote in the world where I work. That is my vote. That's where I put my effort. And so choosing these companies or these efforts, be them science or DeepMind, that's where I say, this is what I think is important in the world, this is what I think. Not to say that there's no other very important things, right? There's absolutely very important problems that we need to solve. We need to solve biology. I was very passionate about biology. We need to solve climate change. We also have a lot of very good minds. But I feel that this is something that I am moderately good at, so maybe I can make an impact there. So it's a combination of this passion and my abilities.
Excellent. So along those lines, Lydia, you're a scientist, an awesome scientist, by the way. I am a fan of yours. But you have also worked on your career. You took steps to transition from the bench to leadership in science. Mm-hmm. Can you share with us more insight about the proactive steps that you took in order to make that transition, and how it worked for you?
I think how it worked for me was not necessarily the way it should work for you, which is that I wasn't so proactive, except in this one sense. And that is that I am a very curious person and like a lot of different things I find interesting. And so even when I was working at the bench, I was very interested in reading about business and about how you manage people to get the best out of them, to help me run my lab. And most of that information was in the business literature. So I read the business literature as a graduate student and as a postdoc. And I read all the time. I really like to read. I read just about anything that comes across, and have learned a lot from the biographies of other great people, and from mysteries and stories that tell you a little bit about how the human mind works. So in the transition, I think the reasons I made transition was because I have a very simple philosophy of how I choose where I work and where I put my efforts. I have to have more fun than I have nights when I wake up worrying. Because any job has times when it's really tough. You have to make tough decisions or things aren't going right. But if most of the time I'm having a good time, then I'm in the right place. And when I'm not, it's time for a change. And so when times for those changes came, those are when I tended to go off in completely different directions, like academic administration or business, or as I'm doing now, lecturing about stuff.
Excellent. Interesting. So Andy, you have been in working for Ford, right?
Yes.
For quite a long time. So talking about, this type of entrepreneurial, type of spirit that engineers and scientists have, how have you applied that entrepreneurship mind at Ford, like exploring different types of roles or partaking in different types of projects? So can you share more about, your career path with Ford?
I started off at Ford as FCG, which is our Ford College Graduate Program, working in transmission and driveline. So I spent about 2.5 years rotating around 6 months. After that, I worked in transmission systems. And then my last assignment as an FCG, I was able to go to Mexico and launch in Mexico. So I had some international experience. After I was in transmission, I came to this group called Powertrain Integration, Program Management. So I worked on a couple different programs, launching domestically and internationally. But as far as the entrepreneurial spirit, I think one way to look at Ford is you have hundreds of small companies within there. So you think of a small business, it's a large business if they're responsible for $1 million. Well, we have programs. One program at Ford, a vehicle program, will be several $1 billion. So I think you have to kind of have a sense of ownership, a sense of responsibility. At Ford, we make cars, but we make cars in mass production that are affordable. It's very easy to make an expensive car that's only available to a select few, but be able to make something that's affordable, that's attractive, that's of high quality, that the masses can buy. That's the challenge, and that's where you need to be intuitive with how you design your products, how you assemble them, the materials you choose, how you produce them, and consider all these factors and attributes when you're designing a vehicle. Beyond that, touching a couple things as far as community stuff, I'm involved with the Ford Hispanic Network. So Ford's a company that does a lot with community, the programs you guys are in, with STEM education. I mentioned the Ford Hispanic Network, but we really want to invest in the future and develop our talent. One, it's good for Ford, but just so Ford is a place where people want to work, where they're going to grow, where they're going to mature, and beyond just the 9 to 5, there's also opportunities to get back to your community, working in STEAM education, working with high school students and other programs we have in the community. So I think kind of having a larger picture beyond just our job, but also the impact we make in the community around us as well.
Excellent, excellent. So I want you guys to give us more, like share more stories about two things. One of them, let's start with experiences that scientists and engineers have, with the international community. I get a lot of questions from students about, like how much do you travel? How much do you engage in collaborations with scientists all around the world? And I think that's one of the interesting aspects of a career in science or and engineering. And Andy, you have had experience with launches of these vehicles and products internationally. So do you want to expand on that?
It all depends on your interest. A company like Ford's a large company. It's a global company. We have locations in across the U.S., plants all over the U.S. There's a supply base all over the world. And also Ford has places in the U.K., in China, in India, in Germany, in Australia, South Africa. So all over the world we have these locations. People who like to travel, there's opportunities to travel. There's international assignments people go on. If that's not what you're interested in, you don't have to go. Those are just opportunities that are available to you. As far as working with a global team, I was on the 2012 Focus a number of years ago, and it was a global launch. So they were launching that vehicle in Saarlouis, or over in Germany. They were launching it here in North America, and they had another third location as well. But we're working with a global team, again, engineers in the UK and Germany, engineers in Brazil and Mexico. So you have different time zones, you have different, sometimes language barriers, but you're working as a team to solve a problem. And I think when people are on board with that, they have the same goals, you can work together and accomplish things pretty effectively. So I think it's one of the things I enjoy about Ford is it's a global company, and you have the opportunity to interface with other cultures and learn things, and it's sometimes a challenge, but that's part of the fun as well.
So Lydia, what fun places have you visited thanks to science?
Oh, science has taken me all over the world, from Africa to the United Kingdom, in England, France, Germany. Interestingly, not so much South America as yet. Haven't been there on business, although I did help teach a course in Mexico City. And part of that has been in things that are related to the science that I've done, so that I testified in the High Court in England, which is a very interesting experience. The legal system there is different from the legal system here in that it's more formalized, so the judge sits up high in a robe and a wig, and lawyers can't prepare you for your testimony, they only ask you questions. And when I went there, I was discussing the work that had been done on insulin. It was a patent dispute, and the barrister who was asking me questions turned out to be Argentinian, although I didn't know that till after the fact. And so he came to me and he said, "Dr. Villa-Komaroff, is it not true that Pancho Villa once nearly killed your grandfather?" And I said, "That's the family story." And he said, "Well, think of the trouble it would have saved me had he succeeded." And we went from there. It turned out there's a book about the work we did on insulin, and this barrister had found that after our back and forth, as we were leaving the courtroom, he came up to me and he said, "Muy bien hecho." So I had done reasonably well in performing. So science can take you not only in terms of scientific exploration, but also at the intersection, where science intersects with other parts of the enterprise, social science, law, politics. All of those things are possible through science and art thing. What I do now has to do really primarily with sociology and how the human mind works. So it's really a very wide open thing. You can start here. The only thing you guys can know right now is whatever you think you'll be doing in 10 years, it'll be different.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you don't know where you'll do it.
Yeah. So, Edgar, tell us where science and engineering has taken you around the world and how your bicultural background. I mean, you were born and raised in Mexico. Now you're here in the United States. Tell us how that bicultural background has helped you achieve your goals and helps you serve your purpose in engineering and at work.
Yes, I'm going to start far from engineering, but I'll get there eventually. So my wife is from Australia. My daughter was born in Boston. and I was born in Mexico. So for the longest time, we couldn't live in the same country unless one of us had a job and visas for the family. Wow. So that was an interesting thing. So we ended up like everywhere, right? So I did my PhD, like I said, in Tennessee, in the US. I did a postdoc in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then I went to Europe. And interestingly, I wanted to go to Europe because it always felt culturally much closer to Mexico than to the US, despite us being neighbors. The idea of having concentrated cities with public transportation and free services and things like that was so appealing to me that I wanted to experience that culture. So I actually applied for positions only in Europe for that second postdoc because I wanted to experience that. And because I had sort of gone to universities to speak, my wife was also a biologist back in the day, and she was invited by the Gothenburg University, and we went there for a summer for a month or two, and we gave we were collaborating with them, and we gave talks, and I was also invited by a university in Texas, and so I've actually been to several places to talk, and now as an engineer, the headquarters of DeepMind are in London, whereas the headquarters of Google are in Mountain View in California. And so we actually, for the first time, have a very sort of long-distance collaboration, and I will echo what Andy was saying about the time zones, the differences, but I think that fundamentally being flexible, echoing what Lydia was saying, very, very important to be flexible. You don't know what you're going to be doing in 10 years, but you don't know who you're going to be talking to next week, right? So London is a very cosmopolitan city, and DeepMind has people from dozens and dozens, 80 or so countries. So, and of course, Google probably has employees from every single country in the world. So it's very challenging, but it's also one of the most appealing things about this sort of quest in life, which science and technology is kind of the way in which we do it. But experiencing other cultures, experiencing other perspectives, it brings humanity into everything we do, right? We are humans, we are social, we interact with one another, and getting a perspective on someone else, because of their culture, because of their food, because of the way they use cars or they don't use cars, or because of the way they appreciate space, public or private. It's very interesting. I think that's definitely one of the most interesting aspects of science and technology.
Yeah. So have you experienced, so when you're at work and you're thinking about ideas, related to artificial intelligence and how to make machines more smarter or more intelligent, do you see yourself sometimes like thinking or meditating about what you have seen, or what you have experienced, through these global international relationships, and how perhaps, those lessons learned could be applied to make machines more like to have empathy, let's say.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. So both from the point of view of of my personal preference, I like being involved in policy discussions, in legal discussions, but also like artificial intelligence systems, if we don't do anything, they will have our own biases, right? They will just mirror the biases that we have. There's some interesting examples in which you have a system that just learn word associations based on words of text, right? You just feed it a bunch of text that humans have published, and then you ask for associations like, for instance, man is to dentist as woman is to, and the intelligence system would say housewife. Right?
Not so intelligent.
Oh gosh, but right, absolutely, because it's just mirroring our biases, right? So we actually have a very strong responsibility and big challenge to actually make sure that we create intelligent systems that are fair. That is a fundamentally difficult but solvable problem. We know our biases. We can correct them. We can at least attempt as much as we can to do that. And I think the perspective of being multicultural, including other people, including other voices, including other perspectives, is crucial to the mission of every major company, as Andy was saying. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why there's been so much diversity talk inside Google and every other major technology company. Because we need to have the conversation of diversity. We need to have a conversation of fairness in the systems we build, in the people we hire, in the users we serve.
Thank you. So I would like to touch base on diversity, on the diversity topic with Lydia. But before we go there, Andy, give us more, insight or share stories about what it takes to develop a product. So you work on product development from cradle to grave. So how can you explain that to a fifth grader? I mean, if possible, so that we understand.
You have a lot of talented people working together on a team, and I think it starts off early on in product planning. They say, okay, what kind of product do we need out there? What do the customers want? What do the customers need? So you start with a target customer in mind, whether you want someone who's a Mustang customer who wants to go fast and performance, whether you want somebody who wants a truck or an off-road vehicle, somebody who wants a fuel-efficient vehicle, somebody who wants an electric vehicle. You want to understand who you're making the vehicle for, how they're going to use it, and you do a lot of homework early up front as far as what you want that vehicle to be. Then you say, okay, well, this person's going to use this vehicle this way. In order to give them the best product, they want these technologies. So you start scoping out early on what those technologies are, whether it be your powertrain options, the number of seats in the car, how tall, how short, how low, how wide, how long, all those aspects of the vehicle, NVH, vehicle dynamics, all these different attributes you want to understand, performance metrics. So you start scoping out the vehicle as far as what that's going to look like, all these metrics. And you say, okay, if you want it to go this fast or have 40 miles per gallon or 100 miles per gallon or be electric and be able to be have a 100-mile range or longer, you have to have these technologies in the vehicle. So you start scoping the vehicle that way, and then once you have what technologies you need, you align the engineering team to start designing those products. They start early on. It's probably a 5-year process, or even longer. But starting up front with that work, then you start getting your parts. You know what the parts are. You're working with suppliers to design them. You're sourcing the suppliers, and then you design your stuff on CAD, CAE. So you do your stuff. Computer engineering, you test stuff analytically on the computer, and then you get to the point where you build prototypes. And then I mentioned that's where I came on the Mustang, where you have about 3 years of prototype builds, physical testing, still analytical testing, and then fixing those issues and going out till the end where you have a final product you sell to customers. But all along the line, you have engineering, you have manufacturing, you have people purchasing, you have people interface with the suppliers, you have marketing, you have sales, you have your dealerships. There's a complex network, and then you think of the complexity of a vehicle. You have 2,000 parts on a bill of material that go in that vehicle. Well, they all have to arrive at the right place at the right time so that you can build a vehicle. So if you have parts that either have quality issues or are not there on time, your line is sitting idle. So it's a complex industry with all kinds of people that are engaged, but it's still fascinating to me how you make it work, the level of detail and coordination, and how we get high quality products that people love at the end of the day.
So how many people can work in a project? The specific time. I mean, is there like a finite number of people?
Let me think. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that because I work in Powertrain, Powertrain integration. So my group that we're responsible for engine, transmission, exhaust, mounts, fuel, controls, calibration, driveline, all these things. So in my world, we have an engine, and I say we have an engine. Well, we have a transmission. Well, within the engine and transmission, there's 200 more parts. And every one of those parts has an engineer who designs it, has an engineer who tests it, has a supplier who builds it, has engineers at that supplier, people, CAD designers who design it, and people who sort, the supplier quality side of that. So there's layers and layers of people from the OEM, the Ford company. You have tier 1 suppliers, you have suppliers who are tier 2, tier 3, and so forth. So it multiplies quickly. I would say on a given program you may have, I have no idea, I would say 1,000, but beyond just the immediate on that team, you have all the layers of people who are also supporting that product. We got that suppliers and different companies and globally as well. So it's,
Excellent. Thank you.
yeah.
So Lydia, there is a lot of conversation about the importance of diversity in STEM, why we need to increase diversity in the workforce. You are one of the founding members of SACNAS, the Society for the Advancement of Science in Chicanos, Hispanics,
Native Americans.
and Native Americans. So tell us more about why is diversity important? Why we need our voices to be heard? Why we need to speak up? Why we need to be engaged?
I think you heard a little bit of it from my two colleagues here, which is that if you have everybody around a team who's trying to do a certain thing, all think in the same way, grew up in the same way, had the same experiences, then that limits the ability of that team to look at a problem and various ways in which it might be solved. And so as a result, you get things like artificial intelligence, which reflects the thinking of a small and limited group of people. And that's really, that will reflect their specific biases. And what you really want is people from a variety of backgrounds, because when that happens, you get many more interesting viewpoints and you prevent mistakes, which can shorten the time that you have to test things, because people look and say, oh, but wait, we didn't think about that because, for example, you're only thinking about men, and I would tell you that as a woman you would need this in this item. And so that is fundamentally wise, because we need those different voices and experiences as we do things. Now, from my perspective, I think that that's been recognized for a long time now, like 50 years. It was 50 years ago that the civil rights movement was held, and when Chavez was out looking out for the farm workers. And despite the fact that it's been recognized, we really haven't made progress fast enough. Hispanics are 20% of the American population right now, and it's growing. And if you bring in the other individuals from other kinds of ethnic groups, there is no white majority, or will not be in a very short time. And so it's incumbent upon us to take leadership roles. So we really need to figure out why it is that we're so slow to have brought in people into these critical things. And of course it starts very early. Children have expectations. So if they don't see someone who looks like them, they may close the door before they even realize the door is there. For example, when my nephew was 4, he met me and my sister, and his mother had brought him. And at the end of that day, he said, "Oh, Mom, I can't be a banker, and I can't be a lawyer, and I can't be a scientist, because those are girls' jobs." So, if you're a little kid and you don't see anybody who looks like you, who is brown or black or a man or a woman, you might not then even consider being a scientist or an engineer or whatever. And so, one, we need those examples. But a more fundamental problem is this business of how we think. The human brain, we have to understand how the human brain works in order to understand our biases so we can ameliorate them. It's not clear that we can get rid of those biases we are born with, because the human mind is a wonderful, miraculous thing, but it is limited. And every second we are receiving huge amounts of data from our touch and hearing and seeing and feeling and the temperature and light and all that stuff. Our minds, no mind can handle it, not the littlest one and not ours. And so the brain has had to figure out mechanisms to ignore a lot of the data that's coming in all the time. It's the ultimate big data problem. That's really what you're dealing with. It's a huge big data problem. As a result, our minds have developed in a way that we do a lot of our thinking without thinking. A lot of our decisions are made, and we're not using what we call thinking. We're just using what we call our gut. And it's a habit. We develop habits, and that's shortcuts so that we don't have to think, and it takes less energy. But as a result of that, our cultural experience develops into some of these habits, and some of them are bad habits, like what we think when we see another, what we respond when we see another person, what we expect of them based on our visual impression of that person. And this is true of all of us. It is not a white man's problem. It is a human problem. We all do it. And so understanding that we all do it is one step, because it's now clear that institutions and individuals who realize that we all have biases are much better at avoiding expressing those biases when they're selecting people for their group or to be their colleague. But if we don't understand that, and if as a country we don't deal with our history, where we've been pretty nasty, no people is free of doing awful things, and no people exist that haven't had awful things done to them. This too is a human thing. But in this country, in the United States, we have not dealt effectively with our history of slavery, with our history of genocide of the native peoples who were here. We just haven't dealt with it. We have to deal with it, forgive ourselves, and move on. But until we deal with it, it's really hard to get rid of these biases. So that's the fundamental problem. That's why we have this issue of not being diverse in the Mouth, why it's been so slow. But the fact is that we need all of the talent we have in this country if we're to succeed in a global sense. We need to be a strong global partner with our other countries in the world. And, face it, we would like to maintain the premier position that we now hold in terms of inventiveness, in terms of wealth, in terms of education, in terms of a lot of things. We're not going to be able to do that unless all of us are at the table making the decisions that need to be made. That's why diversity is important.
Excellent. I think knowing these things is very empowering for me. Understanding the reasons why diversity is important, the reasons why I need to share my thoughts, the reasons why I should not be shy when I am sitting on in the table. It's important because we better serve the purpose, the mission of our organizations when we are part.
Right, and never ever think that you're there. Don't let it get in your way. I know a lot of students will come to me and they say, I don't want to be here because I'm Hispanic. They've chosen me because I'm Hispanic. I'm getting a minority fellowship. Maybe I shouldn't get that. Forget about it. Get there any way you can and then show them what you can do. That's what you need to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Lydia. Edgar, I have been thinking, let's switch back to techie stuff.
Thank you. There's no way I could have followed that. That was amazing.
You say that, but you're living it. We are all living it, right? The things that you have been sharing keep me thinking about artificial intelligence and these best friends of ours, and this is a question out of the blue perhaps. Are we considered now kind of like a biohybrid? The fact that we have we are all the time carrying with mobile devices, and sometimes it feels like it's like a brain outside your body. So what can you tell us about that? I mean, is there research that that it's looking at how we may be evolving to become like a hybrid with technology?
That's a very interesting question, and the short answer is it's complicated. No, I mean, yes, absolutely, right? I mean, my IQ drops by 20 points if I don't have my phone with me.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true, yes. Can you imagine a situation in which you want to know something, like what is the capital of Uzbekistan, and you don't remember it, but you can't actually search it in the next 3 minutes? I mean, our lives have completely been revolutionized by these, as you call them, brains outside of our brains. Yes, technology has been doing this since forever, right? We had abacus. The abacus was precisely something that allowed us to do computation a lot faster with our meat brains using an external thinker helper, right? So this is a trend that is happening, and so Ray Kurzweil, who is a futurist and inventor, has this idea in the near term in which our devices are going to start getting smaller and smaller, smarter and smarter, more and more connected, they will be interfacing much more directly with our brains. And I think that yes, this is augmenting us, but it's not quite enough. We need to do more, right? So and that's why it's so important to have nice artificial intelligences, because otherwise we are subordinate, and we don't want to be, right? This is the first time in history in which a technology could actually be overpowering humans, right? So this
Really?
is we are for the first time. So before, in order to do a scientific revolution or a revolution advancement in a field, you needed to know something about the field, you needed to be an expert, you needed to have maybe a brilliant idea or something, but you needed to basically field. Nowadays, with the advances in machine intelligence, you don't need to be an expert in a field to start revolutionizing it. So hordes of researchers in computer vision were taken by surprise when artificial neural networks were now all of a sudden being as good or even better at recognizing objects in pictures. Like nowadays, you can show a picture to a computer and it will tell you what's in that picture. It will be even superhuman. It will take you, for instance, based on context, where that picture was taken, what time of the day was it, things that you would not be able to know normally, right? Just by cues on what is in the picture, not using like the geotagging information or anything. I think that it's a pivotal moment. Yes, we need to get these computers smaller and better integrated. We're having now smartwatches, right? I haven't gone into the bandwagon yet. I like my wrist to be free, but it will happen, right? Now we have, for instance, Project Iris of Google, in which it's a contact lens, which is smart. It's monitoring your glucose levels. And we will be seeing these things like nanoparticles inside of your body that is monitoring for cancer, things like this. We're going to start embedding computers into our bodies, and they will be performing tasks for us. And very, very critical to make them nice. And I think that's why I want to be working exactly in that, in making those computers nice.
Excellent. So in order to make this, future a reality, Lydia, what would be your advice for students that are interested in molecular biology, that may want to work at the intersection of applications of molecular biology with technologies that will be doing things like, a contact lens, looking at sugar levels, glucose levels. So what would be your advice for those students?
Really, it's to follow what it is that you like to do most, because there are so many paths to get to a particular thing that you want to do, and you're always going to be working in a team. The days of people working all by themselves, except for maybe novelists, is pretty much gone. There's so much out there that it's the team that's really going to be making the fundamental advances that happen. And your part of that is to bring together the dots of these pieces of information out there. So you can do that, for example, for the contact lens. You can do that as a computational biologist. You can do that as a physiologist who understands what's going on in the eye. You can do that as the material scientist who understands what kind of materials you need to have and what their properties need to be. You can do that through the mechanics. How do you make this darn thing anyway? And how do you make it inexpensively and so that it can get out at a reasonable cost? So pretty much any field that you decide to go into can help you get to a team that is doing these really revolutionary and exciting things. My own advice would be, if you want to have the most options, in fact, computation is a very good way in, because there's high demand, first of all, and second of all, it can take you into any of these, and you can pair it with any of the other sciences that you want to. And so it's a very good way to do it. Material science and biomedical engineering, those things are fusing now, where some of the most interesting work is being done by biomedical engineers who understand a lot of biology and a lot of engineering and are putting them together to do very interesting things that involve both living cells and electromechanical types of things. So many paths are open. The most important thing is to really like it, because as I said, there are times when it'll be frustrating when things don't work. If you do any type of science, count on it. It's not going to work a lot of the time. And if it is working all the time, then you're not trying hard enough. So you have to be in something that is worth the effort of going through those times when things don't work.
I would say that one of the most difficult decisions that you may need to make is basically choosing what path to take, because there are so many exciting, and as Lydia is sharing, there are so many ways of getting, to the same place. So many paths. So,
but you do have to choose, ultimately.
You will need to choose, yeah. Don't get stuck in making the decision, but it's really reassuring, as Lydia has shared, that it's okay, that you don't need to copy the path of, any of us. You can create your own path, and it will take you to very interesting places. So Andy, let's talk about the future of cars. Can you tell us how do you envision a future with cars?
So recently, Ford's made the announcement that they're moving just from a car company to a auto and mobility company. So looking at the idea of transportation, how we get around, the infrastructure in cities, and different people's needs, right? Not everybody lives in large cities. Some people live in rural areas, some people in more populous areas, but having different options out there for people. I think we're going to have traditional vehicles, hybrid electrics that we have now will be around. They're not going to disappear overnight. But what you're going to see is this idea of the autonomous vehicles. There's going to be a lot of growth in that area. I talk about most people hate to be in traffic, right? If you're in a hot summer day and you're sitting in traffic for an hour and you're the driver, you only want to be anywhere else but there in that moment. But if I'm able to be in my car and sit back and watch a movie or play a video game or do some emails or take a nap, and then hey, when I get to my destination, I get woken up, a noise comes and I wake up, that'd be all the more. So I think you're going to see with autonomous vehicles, you'll see a change in the ownership model as far as whether people are going to own one car or do ride sharing or joint ownership and some of that stuff. But I think it's going to be transformational as far as where we go in the future. And I think we look for, they're asking all the tough questions now. They're trying to solve all those complex problems, and there's a lot of them out there. But I think it's going to be a lot different than how now a person owns their car and they drive to work. In the future, it's going to be a lot more convenient, where you can maybe push a button, a car comes and picks you up and drops you off where you need to go. I think they say cars, the average car sits idle, I think 80 to 90% of the day, it's parked somewhere. So you're paying all this money for a car that you're only using 10% of the time. Well, if you can share that with other people and find a way to logistically move it around a little better, I think it becomes more affordable. You can scale it and have a lot more of your time back or use it in other ways rather than just sitting in a hot car on a summer afternoon.
So do you see a lot of possibilities and opportunities for code developers?
Absolutely. So
app developers?
Absolutely. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm glad I chose that. It works with how my mind works and being able to touch and see. But autonomous vehicles and the mobility area, there's a lot of stuff with data, big data. There's a lot of controls, a lot of sensors, a lot of coding, computer engineering, computer science, electrical engineers. So that skill set is growing at a faster rate than the traditional mechanical engineer and manufacturer engineer that you see in the auto industry. So Ford has more than doubled their size of their engineering staff in Palo Alto, which is right there near Stanford University. But they're there doing a lot of work on autonomous. University of Michigan has what's called M-City, where they test autonomous vehicles. And that's the big area of growth. But yeah, the biggest needs are people who are versed in computer science, computer engineering, electrical engineering, and that's the largest growth area in the future. You still need mechanical, you still need electrical, you still need industrial, but as far as being on the cutting edge and developing these autonomous vehicles and mobility technology, you need people who are versed in computer skills, computer engineering.
Excellent, excellent. So I think it's about time for us to give the opportunity to our audience over there to ask questions. So are there any questions from the audience that is watching us through Facebook Live?
We do. We have a question. We have a couple of questions, actually. For Dr. Sierra-Sastre and Dr. Villa-Komaroff, what has been the biggest challenge of your career being Latina since then, and how have you overcome
You know, I think that one of the reasons that I've been successful is because I'm really very dense. I just don't notice some things that I'm not paying attention to. And so when people were insulting, or when there were situations where maybe people were indicating that I shouldn't be there or something, I just didn't notice it. Which just tells you that I'm dense, but it also tells you that it's a very good response, because if you're not affected by somebody else's harsh words or attitude or something, then it doesn't get in your way. And so it didn't get in my way because I didn't notice it. Now, sometimes I noticed it like later. I'd say, oh, gee, that wasn't so nice, was it? Like walking into MIT the first time when I started graduate school, I was asked if I was there for the secretary's position. Or when I went to go visit my mother-in-law, she introduced me to someone in her complex in California, and the woman said, oh, when are you going to start working for Jackie? My mother-in-law is a petite blonde. And Jackie said, this is my daughter-in-law, the professor at Harvard. I was an assistant professor, but hey. So, and I think there must have been teachers along the way who both encouraged and discouraged me, and I just didn't notice the discouragement because the encouragement was there. And I wanted to do certain things, so I did them. I think that was one. So being a Latina was not really much of a problem for me. And when I went to college, you know, being Latina, you can be pretty much anything. If you keep your mouth shut, you can be American, you could be South American, you could be Mexican, you could be Arabic. You can be identified as something from almost any place in the world. We're not easily pigeonholed as to where we are or what kind of person we are. And so that was, I think, something that was useful. And then I learned to take advantage of in some cases. So that can be an advantage. We are in a situation, many of us, where it's a little bit harder to decide who we are, what we can do. The other thing I think is that I think we all have it, this kind of a radar. You know when somebody doesn't respect you, you're sort of uncomfortable around them because they're the people who make you feel like maybe I'm here because of who I am, because I'm a woman or Latina or whatever. And so I had pretty good radar of that sort, and there were people like that, both in my career. And I don't think I understood it at the time. So for example, in graduate school, my advisor was a Nobel laureate. The guy who admitted me to graduate school was a Nobel laureate. The guy I worked for as a postdoc was a Nobel laureate. These were tough guys. They expected a lot of us. They worked us very hard. They yelled at us when we messed up. But my mentors, every one of them, did not expect any less of me than of the other people in the lab. And I had the good sense to avoid the people that I sensed felt that I didn't quite maybe belong at MIT. So that kind of radar can be really very useful in overcoming any of those challenges.
Thank you. So I can share that my biggest challenge as a Latina in STEM, believe it or not, was to, so I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I started my grad school in 2004 at Cornell, and my English was so bad, really. I mean, it was bad. I was not fluent in English at all. And that had a toll in my self-esteem at times. I always say that Spanish is the language of my heart and my soul, and having this experience of being immersed in a different culture and now having to, express myself and communicate in a language that was not my first language, had a role in some sort of transformation, right, at the personal level, even spiritual level, in the sense that, when we speak a different language, we act differently, we think differently. But at the same time, it was a challenge. It was an opportunity to build resilience. So those tough experiences really helped me to become a more resilient individual. I am not afraid of things. I am not afraid of challenges. I am like, the opportunity is there. Someone asks me, yes, I will do it. So that how things, that were challenging at times, how I have turned them, upside down, and they have worked for the good.
So we have another question, which is for Andy. I know you mentioned earlier that you're a fourth generation Ford employee. What is it like, what does it feel like to be having such a legacy of Ford, being there and making your own legacy at Ford? What is it like to be a Ford employee with the legacy behind you and the legacy you are leaving behind?
Yeah. I think working at Ford, they call it a family. We have the Ford family, but I think it's different from other companies where it is owned by a family, and the culture there is of a family. My great-grandfather worked there. My grandpa worked 35 years on the line at the Rouge plant. My father was an engineer at Ford, worked 32 years, and he actually worked those years in the same building where I'm working now. So I remember growing up and going to visit him and stop in, and I have a picture of one of his last weeks at work that I look at. But there's a huge amount of pride, as mentioned. People from Detroit and from the area take pride in being from there. It's the Motor City, and there's nowhere else in the world that has that claim of being from the Motor City. So there's a lot of pride. But I do realize that my father was a talented man, very intelligent, and from time to time I come across people at the company who, when they say, "Oh, you're Joe's son," and they say, "Oh, he was a good guy, a great engineer," and it makes me proud to know that, but it also says, all right, well, there's a responsibility I have to do well and to carry the torch and to continue to do well there. So not a burden, but it's just an appreciation for people who have gone before. I know because of his hard work and his sacrifice, he opened up opportunities for me, and I hope to do the same for my children as well. I have 2 daughters. The oldest is 6, the youngest is 2. And this past year, I took the youngest one to Take Your Child to Work Day. So she was there in the building where I work, where her grandpa worked, and I have pictures of each of my daughters inside that building, their Ford Engineering Lab, of each of them, where I can look back and there's generations of people who have been there. So it's a point of pride. It's you want to live up to the standards that have been set before you, but you also know there's great things ahead.
We have another question, which is for all the panelists, which is, building off of what Andy was just saying about taking his daughters to work and showing them where he works and the legacy. We have several scientists in the room, aspiring scientists in the room, who are female. And this is, I know, a point of a lot of importance across the nation and in corporations, education, nonprofit, government. So for all the panelists, why is it important to inspire girls and young females to aspire to STEM careers? What do you think they should keep in mind as they maybe look at this opportunity?
Well, first of all, we're half of the population. So right there, it's half of the brains in the country, and so we need the brains. And the other is that it's a matter of choice, that men and women should have equal opportunity to choose how they live their life. And for some of us, that means working and having a family both. For others of us, it means splitting those responsibilities, and as you guys grow up, it'll be more of a conversation, because it's not anymore so given that the primary parent, that is the parent who is most responsible for child rearing, is the mom. It's still there, but it's less. And you have a choice. I was very fortunate because my great aunt, my tia Linda, had no kids in a time when that just simply was not the case. So that told me that it was possible to consider a life without children of one's own. Now, there's a lot of kids in my life. I have over 101 first cousins. I have 17 nieces and nephews, 29 grandnieces and nephews, and 4 godchildren. So kids come to us when they want to get away from their parents, which has been a nice thing to do. And it's also been a thing for us, so that you can have kids without having them your own kids, or you will have children when you decide you want them, and because you want them, which is a really important thing to do.
So I would say, why is it important that we talk to girls and encourage them to pursue career in STEMs? It's important because if they don't, they are going to be missing out a lot. Really, my career in science has been awesome, amazing. That experience that you have in the lab when you are doing research and you are the first person in the entire world looking at something for the first time, making a discovery, I can tell you that moment is something that you will never forget. And that's an experience that transforms you intellectually, spiritually, emotionally. And that's something that I want others to also experience. I don't want girls to be missing out. I want girls to really have those awesome experiences. We need more girls in science. I want to have more co-workers that are females, to have that type of support structure. So we need you guys. We need your brains. We need you, and we want you to have all those type of fun experiences.
Yeah, I would say I want to challenge the premise that we need to encourage people, basically echoing the idea that humans are curious, right? Regardless of whether they're male, female, other, right? Regardless of what their gender is, regardless of what their ethnicity is, humans are just curious. If you just look at a child play, they're all natural scientists, right? So I don't think we need to encourage people. What we need to do is just not discourage them. I see that as a fundamental thing. I have a daughter. She's 6 years old. And we had been playing with math, playing with building some electronics, motors, Legos, things like this. She loved those things. She started to go to school. And she came one night. I mean, doing math with Daddy was like a privilege for nighttime, okay? It was something that she looked forward to. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna get to do math with Daddy before sleep time. That's great. She starts to go to school. She comes back and tells me, subtractions are boring. My heart broke that night. I tried to take it in stride, right? And I said, like, what do you mean they're boring? They can't be boring. How else are you going to measure how distant some things are? She looked at me like, what? And then I started explaining to her that subtraction is what you do to measure the distance between 2 points. So just reframing it from a, you need to do your homework, to a, this is what life is. Things are there. What you use math for is to understand them. And then all of a sudden she was taken by it. And now she says that additions are not her favorite, that subtractions are. But I'll work on that. But I mean, that is the thing, right? Encouragement, yes. The importance is that they don't miss out. It's just there. Let's not crush them. Mathematics are not hard. We teach them hard. Mathematics is just looking at the world and figuring out what's going on. It's just beautiful. If you didn't have to work, people are worried that maybe you would just be scratching your belly or playing video games all day. The reality is that people, when they don't work, start to wonder about things and start to learn. That's what humans do. We are curious. We don't like to be confined into a little place. We want to be set free into the world and figure out things. Some people like to interact with others and figure out social interactions very much. But some of us are more into the, let's figure out the interactions with the environment. We're a bit less social, a bit introverted, that's okay. It's not a problem, right? We just, those people, regardless of gender, regardless of age, and regardless of ethnicity, those are the people who are going to be scientists. And they're going to change the world like every single generation of scientists have changed it in the past. We don't need to do any subsetting by any gender or anything else.
Bravo. Excellent.
I guess I would start by saying that as girls and as women in STEAM and engineering, that there's nothing that you guys can't do. You guys can do everything that a man can do, and the same opportunities are out there for each of you guys, and each of you ladies. So it's a question of what you want to do. I mentioned take your child to work day. Well, something I facilitated this year was a STEManista panel. So when my daughter was coming, I said, what is she going to see? Well, a while back we were talking, hey, do you want to go, you want to be an engineer? You're like, no, it's cars. Cars are for boys. So she had some impression that was an industry for men. And I wanted to kind of break down that wall. So when she came to Ford that day, we had a panel of about 8, a bunch of different sessions, but we had women who were engineers, we had managers, we had supervisors, we had people who were early on in their career, but they were talking about, hey, I race motorcycles. I worked in Ford racing and did these. I work in hybrid vehicles. I work with the Society of Women Engineers, but they were role models or examples in front of them that she could see and say, yeah, okay, cars are not just for boys. There's other women who are doing that. In addition, my wife has her degree in civil engineering. My wife is from Puerto Rico as well, has her degree in civil engineering, so I think right there in the house she can see the example that, hey, if this is something I want to do, I can do it. Now, as a father, I would love it if she was the 5th generation there, and that'd be a great thing, but I want to support her in whatever she wants to do, and I think introducing her to different opportunities that are out here and encouraging her talents and cultivating those, I think is one of my responsibilities as a father. I think it's good for them to be able to see examples that are out there. I mean, my mouth is floored listening to you guys, and you have unique brains and intelligent people. And I think the more people can see that, it opens up their eyes that, wow, I can be that person one day. I can have my Ph.D. I can work in science. I can work in technology. And there's no reason that any of you guys can't do that if you wanted to do it. So it's just, I think, opening up people's eyes and exposing them to opportunities, and then seeing if that sparks a natural interest they have to pursue that field.
So our last question of our Facebook Live session this afternoon, it's a fun one, which is tell us a fun experience that you had with your work and in science, something that is either really funny, that it was a lesson learned that wasn't meant to be, or something just really amazing and fun that you had in your science, because I think sometimes people think scientists are boring and engineers are boring, and actually you're very exciting because you have a lot of interesting experiences that people never hear about. So this is a great opportunity to share some lighthearted fun with the audience.
I had an example I was going to go to, but HR might be listening to this, so I'm going to go to the second option I had here. I remember as an FCG in the college graduate program, I was able to work in a calibration group in transmission. So something that they do throughout the launch period, and I think it's during one of the middle rounds, they do what's called a PVP trip. So they go, they ship vehicles out west, and they basically go on a two-week road trip, testing the vehicles and trying to flush out issues and identify issues and resolve them. So I was able to go on this trip, and we started in Arizona at the Ford Proving Grounds. We went up different stops. We drive about 6 hours a day. They would stop. They would review the issues, and you would drive the next day. So Arizona. We went to Lake Tahoe. We went to Palm Springs. Ended up in Las Vegas. But it was a 2-week road trip where you're driving vehicles. You're working with the teams that are there, the calibration, NVH, the vehicle engineering groups. And I remember as I was sitting on the beach in La Jolla, I remember sitting out there at the beach at the end of the day saying, all right, I just got paid for 2 weeks to go on a road trip. And it was a great experience, but we were doing real work that's value added, that was solving problems. But sometimes you get in these neat jobs that are actually fun to do and rewarding and enjoyable, and that was one of them.
I'd like to talk about something that was related but completely different, which is I was vice president for research at Northwestern University in Chicago for 7 years. And when I was there, one of the people that I worked with had a son who ran a theater company, and her husband was a metropolitan baritone who had retired. And so Ryan started giving me voice lessons, and he said, you don't have to keep it in the shower. Why don't you audition for my son's theater company? He's going to be putting on The King and I, and maybe you can be one of the wives. So I auditioned for being one of the wives, and I ended up being able to play Lady Tiang at the Marquis Theater, and got to sing all those wonderful songs, Something Wonderful. And this was a group which was, Chicago's a really interesting theater place, because even in community theaters, there'll be equity actors along with non-equity people, because it's just a very rich environment for folks interested in the arts, as well as science. And so that group of scientists and judges and people from the area getting together, including a whole bunch of little kids. Well, they were real little kids who played the children of the king, putting on this show for the Evanston community was terrific, and actually wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been someone who could go to Northwestern to be the vice president.
Excellent. So, to talk a little bit about my background is in nanotechnology and material science. That's what I did during grad school and for my PhD. But one of my first jobs, STEM jobs, was as an assistant for an analytical chemist in a lab where they did testing of drugs in urine samples. So, yes, that was one of my first jobs. That was a time where I actually questioned, really? I mean, I got a chemistry degree to be playing with pee, and bodily fluids, in this lab. But interesting enough, eventually I learned, how to build that tolerance or resilience for smells and ways, pee can look sometimes and all that. And anyways, why I'm saying this? Because after I did my PhD, I worked for a startup for a couple of years as a research scientist, working with textiles. And that experience then, after that experience, I applied for a Mars analog mission. And I was selected to be part of this crew of scientists and engineers that lived and worked like astronauts in a Mars analog mission. We were like working and living like astronauts in a future mission on Mars, on planet Mars. And as simulation astronauts, where we had to do many types of things. Besides research, we needed to cook, we needed to clean, we needed to fix things. And guess what? There was a time when toilets started to break. And who was the person that was able to fix the toilet? Who was the person that was able to say, okay, it's fine, I can, take care of this mess? Me, thanks to that prior experience, playing with urine and pee in the lab. So.
Very cool. I mean, who doesn't want to be an astronaut? Raise your hands. Oh. Wow. Surprising. Very good. Yeah, so I have a quick one. So like I mentioned, I love biology. I'm a nerd. I've always been, but I still love biology so very much. I was adventuring in New Zealand with my now wife, and we went to a cave. And the cave is a very special one because a specific type of fungus gnat lives there. So it's the larva of a mosquito-like thing. But it has bioluminescence, which means they glow. They're called glowworms. They're not really worms, but they live in the ceiling of the cave. And they sort of produce silk to trap other insects and eat them. They're kind of like spiders. But they luminesce so that it looks like it's the starry sky. So I was there looking at this completely black ceiling dotted with beautiful blue lights. And then there was this child next to me who said, oh, now I know where the stars go to sleep when it's day outside. Anyway, so this is kind of the marvel of science, right? Richard Feynman had an artist friend. Richard Feynman, the physicist, he had an artist friend that said to him, "You scientists, you take a beautiful flower, and you need to analyze it, and you destroy the beauty of it by analyzing it." And Feynman got really angry with his friend, saying, "How can it possibly detract to understand that there is a plant in the world that uses insects to reproduce, that it has this beautiful shape, and that it exudes these beautiful sweet smells, and that it has some nectar inside, so that it can lure an insect and come there and grab some pollen and go to another flower and pollinize it. And that is how these plants reproduce. How can that possibly subtract from the appreciation of this beautiful flower? Science cannot subtract. Science cannot only add. And that's exactly how I felt when I was there in that cave, looking at those beautiful dots of light, understanding that they're using that light to mimic a starry night so that insects would go up and they would eat them. That did not subtract anything from the experience. That made it richer, that made it more beautiful, more powerful. And so I've been chasing bioluminescence ever since. I really like it. I did an overnight kayaking trip in the Tomales Bay north of Silicon Valley. And when you paddle in the water lights up in the middle of the night. It is magical. And again, science was there with me. When a fish moves around, it lights up, it tells predators, there's something here, it's eating us, come eat it. So the bacteria are saying, please help us. And someone else comes and eats the fish that was there by lighting up. Science only adds, it cannot subtract.
So thank you so much for your questions. This way we are finishing, closing up for this tremendous, amazing conversation with these STEM professionals. So thank you very much for joining us through Facebook Live. Thank you and see you next time.